So here's three proper names, proper nouns, actually. Michael Waltz is the National Security Advisor for Donald Trump. That's one. Signal, that's two. Signal is a free, very popular encrypted messaging app that lots of journalists and public officials use for private communication. And the third proper noun here is Jeffrey Goldberg. He's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine. And here is the astounding collision of those three proper names. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, Signal, the encrypted messaging app, and Jeffrey Goldberg, well-known journalist. Quote, the Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans. By Atlantic magazine editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg. He says, quote, on Tuesday, March 11th, I received a connection request on Signal from a user identified as Michael Waltz. I accepted the connection request, hoping this was the actual national security advisor and that he wanted to chat about Ukraine or Iran or some other important matter. 2 days later, Thursday, at 4:28 p.m., I received a notice that I was to be included in a Signal chat group. It was called the Houthi PC small group. A message to the group from Michael Waltz read as follows. Team, establishing a principles, misspelled, principles group for coordination on Houthis, particularly for over the next 72 hours. Now, you could see why Jeffrey Goldberg would be skeptical that this is real, right? That he really has been added to a private chat group for high-level coordination of something having to do with the Houthis and the war in Yemen. But the list of the people in the chat appeared to include not just Trump National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, but also Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Still amazing. Still amazing. Trump's Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, Trump's Middle East envoy and real estate friend, Steve Witkoff, who incidentally says he recently took a painting of Donald Trump to the White House as a gift from the Kremlin. Did you guys x-ray that? Also, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. All these people appear to be on this group chat. If journalist Jeffrey Goldberg remained skeptical that these were actually those people on the chat, the Trump officials in the chat apparently didn't realize that their discussion now included a very well-known Washington journalist. Like, it actually appears that not only were they all talking about this topic on Signal, but none of them checked to see who else was in the group while they were chatting. Nobody said, like, oh, who's in this group? Jeffrey Goldberg says Pete Hegseth at one point told the group, quote, we are currently clean on OPSEC. They were not clean on OPSEC. They were not clean on operational security, not even close. We know he sent that text because a journalist was in the group chat that he was texting. Currently clean on OPSEC. Must have felt cool to say it, though, right? What skeptical Jeffrey Goldberg saw in that chat ended up becoming sensitive enough that he doesn't fully describe it in his story today, but he does report that on the morning of Saturday, March 15th at, quote, 11:44 a.m., the account labeled Pete Hegseth posted in Signal a team update. Goldberg says, I will not quote from this update or from certain other subsequent texts. What I will say, in order to illustrate the shocking recklessness of this Signal conversation, is that the Hegseth post contained operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. According to the lengthy Hegseth text, the first detonations in Yemen would be felt 2 hours hence at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time, when, sure enough, the first explosions from the U.S. military strikes were reported in the capital of Yemen. And then the group chat celebrated the military effort with great work and good job and fire emojis. Jeffrey Goldberg says he watched the attack play out from his car in a grocery store parking lot. Once he had seen enough to know that this actually had been a real group chat with those actual people, he got out. He left the chat. They had apparently been texting him and each other classified information on a commercially available, non-classified, text-based communication system. A spokesperson for the National Security Council later confirmed what Jeff Goldberg already understood, quote, "This appears to be an authentic message chain, and we are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain." The administration confirmed for NBC News that it is reviewing how this happened. The whole story is, I mean, how is this real life? How are these people in charge of what they're in charge of? I will tell you that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters today, quote, "Nobody was texting war plans." I will also tell you the president said that he hadn't heard about any of this until a reporter asked. Said he had no idea. News to him, didn't know a thing about it. Well, we will all have plenty of opportunity to hear more about it. The ranking Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Jack Reed, called the carelessness by Trump's cabinet, quote, "stunning and dangerous." He said, quote, "I will be seeking answers from the administration immediately." Democratic Senator Chris Coons from the Foreign Relations Committee said this story, quote, "calls for a prompt and thorough investigation," saying this is a shocking breach of the standards for sharing classified information that could have put American service members at risk. Because God keeps a date book, two of the Trump cabinet members who were in that group chat, Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe, were already scheduled to appear on Capitol Hill tomorrow morning as witnesses for the Senate Intelligence Committee's open hearing on worldwide threats. Joining us now is Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia. He's the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Sir, it's always an honor to have you with us. Thanks for making time to be here tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
Let me start by getting your reaction to this story. Let me also ask if you learned about it in The Atlantic the way that we all did, or if there was some governmental response that we don't know about here.
Well, Rachel, I didn't think this administration could still shock me. But today's story, which I read about in The Atlantic, was beyond belief. It was like, holy crap, on steroids. This is another example of carelessness, sloppiness, and a crowd that's not ready for prime time. I mean, the remarkable thing, you think about you're on a group chat and you don't know who everybody is. I mean, if this had been an intelligence officer who had done this, they'd be fired immediately. And the truth is, you know, Signal is not a classified channel. I got questions tomorrow. Have they collected all the phones to make sure malware is not on some of these phones now? Do they realize that Russia and China have targeted Signal to try to break in? Do they realize that, and, you know, frankly, I think Hegseth needs to go, or Waltz needs to go. The idea that you are conveying on this encrypted but not classified means the actual military plans, and I believe Jeff Goldberg. You know, my God, if this had been the Democrats, there would be investigations, there would be hearings, and we're going to have this tomorrow. We're going to have it out in the open hearing. This crowd is not ready for prime time. And I would point out Tulsi Gabbard, who all of the Democrats suppose as director of national intelligence, who's been a spokesman on many right-wing media since he got this job, is said about the same time, if there is any leaker, they've got to be held fully accountable. Well, we're going to ask tomorrow, beyond Hegseth, beyond Waltz, what other in this group should be held fully accountable for, frankly, breaching security protocols 101? And I just point out quickly that, you know, this comes on top of them releasing a couple hundred of CIA names of people who were, you know, a year or so in. We spent a couple $100,000 on these agents, getting them cleared, getting them through training. All of their identities were revealed. Those guys can't go out and work around the world anymore. We've had other classifications revealed. And we've obviously got the Doge boys out there printing totally wrong information about supposed savings. At what point, and I'm glad to see you're highlighting all the Americans around the country rising up, but I hope those who care about our national security will also start rising up. We are not made safer by these actions.
Let me ask if this is a big enough shock that you expect that some of your Republican colleagues may join you in calling for John Ratcliffe to resign, calling on Pete Hegseth to resign. I mean, I feel like I've covered a lot of embarrassing, inadvertent releases of sensitive information of various types where things through recklessness or negligence have been released. This seems to have been a deliberate decision to create a completely insecure communications medium that is compounded by the stupidity of having included a journalist and not known they were doing it. But I just feel like this is so much worse than anything we've ever seen for people operating at this kind of a level. Will Republicans care about it?
Well, listen, this is gross negligence on steroids. And if they don't step up, and I got a lot of respect for the folks I work with on the intelligence, but I've been disappointed. I was disappointed when more of them didn't stand up against Tulsi Gabbard when she refused to call Edward Snowden a traitor. But at some point, something's got to give. And people who care about our national security, people who don't want it, the American first to be America alone, because if we don't have friends and allies, if countries around the world won't share their intelligence with us because a bunch of sloppy folks are putting it out on a non-classified signal channel, if you're not willing to stand up and call that out, what level of abuse, what level of sloppiness will it take to rise up and actually stand up for the country?
Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner, senior Democrat on the Intelligence Committee. I know you've got a very big day tomorrow with this very, very high-pressure hearing. Thank you for taking time to join us tonight. I appreciate it, sir.